The evening was just beginning at the Grand Estate, a place that seemed almost unreal to anyone who didn't live in that world. The mansion stood tall on a hill, wrapped in soft, golden lights that made it look like something out of a dream. Cars rolled up along the long driveway, each one more expensive than the last, carrying guests dressed in elegant clothes that sparkled under the night sky. Laughter and polite chatter drifted out from the open doors as people stepped inside, ready for a night filled with music, speeches, and luxury. Inside, everything smelled of fresh flowers and warm candles. Soft music played from hidden speakers, and the air buzzed with excitement. The staff moved quickly around the room, placing glasses on tables, adjusting decorations, and checking last-minute details. Among them was a young woman named Emily. She wore a simple black uniform like the rest of the servers, her hair tied back neatly. Trying her best to blend in, even though she felt a little out of place, Emily always felt slightly nervous at events like this. It wasn't because she didn't know how to do her job. She was actually very good at it. It was more because everything around her felt so different from her own life. The shiny marble floors, the giant crystal chandeliers, the expensive gowns worn by the guests was all so far from the modest apartment she shared with her mother. But she needed the money, and this job, though tiring, helped pay bills and buy medicine. So she kept her head down, worked hard, and tried not to be noticed. Tonight's event was especially important. The host, Leonard Whitmore, was known across the city for his wealth and his big charity events. People admired him, though they also whispered that he loved showing off just a little too much. He enjoyed being the center of attention and liked to surprise his guests with dramatic moments or unexpected challenges. Still, his events always raised a lot of money for good causes. So people continued attending. Emily had never met him personally, but she had seen him from afar, always surrounded by people, always smiling in a confident way. She wasn't sure what to think of him, but she hoped the night would go smoothly and that she wouldn't accidentally get. In his way, her main task for the evening was to serve drinks near the large grand piano that sat in the center of the ballroom. The piano was stunning shiny black, polished so perfectly that the room's lights reflected off its surface like water. It stood on a raised platform, waiting for the professional musician who would perform later in the night. Whenever Emily walked by the piano, she couldn't help but glance at it longer than she should. There was something about it that pulled her in. The smooth keys, the elegant frame, the promise of music, it made her heart feel both warm and heavy at the same time. She loved the piano more than anything, even though she rarely had the chance to play anymore. Life had become too busy, too complicated. The piano had slowly become something she admired from a distance instead of something she touched every day. Still, the feeling never left her. Sometimes when she was alone, she would hum melodies she used to play. It comforted her in a way nothing else could. Tonight, maybe because she was tired, or maybe because the sight of the grand piano made her feel nostalgic, she caught herself humming softly while arranging a tray of glasses. She didn't notice that the host himself had walked up behind her. Leonard stood nearby, watching guests enter while keeping an eye on the staff. He liked everything to be perfect. As he approached the piano area, he heard a soft melody being hummed. It wasn't loud or distracting, but it caught his attention. He looked over and saw Emily, carefully placing glasses in a straight line. He raised an eyebrow. "Well," he said lightly, "you seem very comfortable around the piano." Emily jumped a little and quickly bowed her head. "Oh, sorry, sir. I didn't realize I was humming." Leonard gave a half smile, the kind people wear when they think they're being charming. "Do you know anything about this instrument?" he said, tapping the piano lid with one finger, "or were you just humming to pass time?" His tone wasn't mean, but it carried a teasing edge, as if he expected her to say no. Emily hesitated. She didn't want to talk too much. Staff were expected to stay polite, quiet, and invisible. "I just like music," she said softly. Leonard chuckled. "Music is nice, yes. But this piano isn't a toy. It's quite valuable, and we have a real performer tonight." He spoke as though he assumed she didn't fully understand the importance of it. Emily forced a small smile. "Of course, sir. I understand." But inside she felt a tiny sting. She didn't want praise or recognition, but being spoken to like she was clueless made her stomach twist a little. Leonard, however, wasn't done. His eyes narrowed playfully. "Tell me," he said, "do you even know how to play? Or do you only hum the music?" A few nearby guests glanced over, sensing he was joking, but also aware of the slight condescending tone. Emily kept her eyes lowered. "I used to play. A little," she replied quietly. "That's so?" Leonard said, sounding amused. "Used to. Interesting." He gave a small laugh and shook his head, as if the idea of a waitress playing the piano was a cute exaggeration. Emily stepped back, wanting to disappear. She didn't want people looking at her. She didn't want to be part of some casual joke. She just wanted to do her job. But Leonard had already turned away, calling for a technician to check the sound system again. Emily let out a slow breath when he was gone. She tried not to let it bother her. People often assumed things about her. It wasn't new. Still, she wished for a second that she could sit at the piano and show everyone that she understood. It more than they would ever guess, but she shook the thought away. Tonight wasn't about her. For the next hour, guests continued arriving until the ballroom was full. The lights dimmed softly as servers moved around with trays of drinks and appetizers. Emily walked carefully between groups of people, listening to fragments of conversations about travel, business, and charity work. She kept her smile steady even when her feet began to ache. Every so often, she found herself drifting back toward the piano. She didn't touch it, of course. She just felt strangely comforted standing near it, like being close to an old friend she hadn't spoken to in years. She thought about her mother for a moment and wondered if she was watching television at home or maybe already asleep. Emily hoped she had remembered to take her medicine. The thought tightened her chest a little, but she forced herself to stay focused. While adjusting glasses on one of the side tables, Emily caught herself humming again, just a simple warm-up scale she used to practice long ago. She stopped immediately and glanced around to make sure no one else heard. Thankfully, no one seemed to notice this time, but she didn't realize that Leonard had circled back toward the piano. He didn't approach her again, but he watched from a distance with mild curiosity. Something about the way she lingered near the instrument stuck in his mind. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was just one of many staff members doing her job. Still, the image of her humming and glancing longingly at the piano stayed with him. Even as he greeted new guests with his usual warm smile, the ballroom grew louder with laughter and conversation. As the night warmed up, the first speech was moments away, and then the professional pianist would perform. Everything was running smoothly. Emily felt relieved that nothing had gone wrong, but she didn't know that the small moment she shared with the piano, the humming, the simple response she gave Leonard, was just the beginning. Something was shifting quietly, almost invisibly. In the background of the elegant evening, she continued to work, unaware that her life was about to be pulled into the spotlight in a way she never expected. She had no idea that her quiet love for music would soon turn the entire event upside down. Ballroom had reached its busiest moment of the night. Every table was filled, the lights had dimmed to a warm glow, and the sound of glasses clinking mixed with quiet excitement. People were waiting for the host to begin the main part of the evening. It was the time when everyone paused their conversations, straightened their jackets or dresses, and listened politely to the opening remarks. Emily continued moving carefully between the tables. Carrying a tray with water and sparkling drinks, she tried to stay focused, but she could feel her nerves buzzing again. Every time she passed the piano, she felt a strange mix of longing and fear. She wanted to touch the keys just once, but she knew better than to even think about it. When the music playing through the speakers faded out, the room slowly grew quieter. A tall man tapped the microphone at the front, announcing that the host would begin his speech soon. Emily stepped to the side of the room, holding her tray close to her chest. This was usually the moment when staff tried to disappear from the main view. Then Leonard walked onto the small stage with his usual confident smile. The guests clapped politely, and he lifted one hand to acknowledge them. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice filling the room with ease. "Thank you for joining us tonight. Your support means more than you know." Emily listened while pretending not to. His speech was smooth, practiced, and calm. He talked about the charity, about helping families in need, and about the importance of community. The crowd nodded and murmured approvingly, but after a few minutes, his tone shifted slightly. Emily knew enough about his events to recognize the change. This was when he usually added something unexpected, something to get people talking. And of course, Leonard continued, turning his head toward the piano, we have a beautiful instrument waiting for its moment. Several guests turned to look at the piano. The performer for the night wasn't scheduled yet. But some people thought Leonard might introduce them early instead. He surprised everyone. Sometimes, he said, his eyes scanning the room, music finds us in unexpected ways. Tonight I happened to overhear something that caught my attention. Emily froze. Leonard stepped closer to the piano, smiling in a way that showed he was planning something. While the staff were preparing, I heard a young lady humming a tune here by the piano. Quite confidently, I might add. A soft wave of laughter moved through the crowd. Emily's heart dropped. She looked down quickly, hoping he didn't mean her. But deep inside, she knew he did. Leonard continued, enjoying the reactions. Now, I couldn't help but wonder if our young server had any real connection to music, or if she simply liked the sound of this very expensive piano. A few guests chuckled again. Emily felt her face grow warm. She wanted to disappear behind the nearest curtain. This wasn't the kind of attention she wanted or could handle, and so, Leonard said, his tone playful, but sharper than before, I thought it might be entertaining for all of us to see just how brave she is. The ballroom became unusually still, the kind of quiet where every person is waiting for the next words. Emily closed her eyes for a second. Her hands tightened on the tray. My friends, Leonard said with a flourish, I'd like to invite our humming waitress to the stage. Let's see what she can do. Gasps, whispers, and curious looks swept across the room. Emily stood frozen in place. She wasn't prepared for this. She didn't ask for this. She wasn't a showpiece or someone to be put on display for fun. A few servers nearby looked at her with wide eyes, silently asking if she would go. She didn't know what to do. Leonard looked around the room dramatically. Where is she? Don't be shy now. Emily wished she could sink into the floor. But she couldn't run. Not here, not during an important event where she could easily lose her job. After a long moment, she slowly stepped forward. People shifted in their chairs to get a better view of her. Some smiled sympathetically, others looked amused. A few appeared excited to see what would happen. Emily kept her eyes low as she approached the front. She didn't look at Leonard. She didn't look at the guests. She just breathed slowly and tried not to tremble. When she reached the small stage, Leonard gave her a polite but almost challenging nod. There she is, he said warmly. Our mysterious musician. Emily shook her head lightly. Sir, I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I was only humming while working. I know, Leonard said, still smiling. But now that you're here, why not give us a little tune? Just a small one. Something simple. Emily's chest tightened. She didn't want to play in front of all these people. She hadn't played in months, maybe longer. And this wasn't a friendly invitation. This was a public test. Sir, she said quietly, I don't think I should. A few people in the audience encouraged her softly. Let her try. Someone whispered, come on, it'll be fun. It's only a piano. Emily swallowed. She knew she couldn't argue in front of everyone. She had to do something. Leonard stepped aside and gestured to the piano. Go ahead, he said. Just a moment of music. We're all very curious. Emily slowly approached the instrument. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. Her fingers felt cold, and her hands shook slightly. The piano looked even more intimidating up close. Its surface was smooth and perfect, untouched so far tonight. The lights above made it shine like a mirror. For a moment, she only stared at the keys. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her. Her breath felt shallow. She placed the tray down carefully on a nearby stand and wiped her palms on her uniform. Then she sat on the bench. Her hands hovered over the keys. Uncertain, her mind was blank. She could hear a few quiet giggles in the back. Someone whispered something she couldn't make out. Leonard stood nearby, arms loosely crossed, watching with a half-interested expression. He didn't look cruel, just certain she would play a few clumsy notes and finish the moment quickly. Emily closed her eyes. She tried to block out the room. The lights. The people. The pressure. She tried to remember the feeling she used to have as a child when she played just for the joy of it. She used to sit at her old upright piano in her mother's living room for hours, losing herself in melodies. Slowly her fingers lowered onto the keys. The cool smoothness of the piano felt familiar in a way that almost made her throat tighten. Her first attempt to press a key was shaky. Her finger barely grazed the surface. But then, she pushed a little harder. A single clear note filled the room. It echoed softly. Pure and gentle dot. Emily felt something unlock inside her. Something she had buried under months of exhaustion, worry, and responsibility. Her hands relaxed. She pressed another key and another. Her mind cleared, and she began to play. Not a rehearsed piece, not something technically perfect, just a simple, flowing melody she had always loved. A tune she used to play when she needed comfort. The room went quiet as the notes grew richer. The laughter stopped. The whispers faded. People leaned forward in their seats. Emily didn't look at anyone. She didn't need to. She let her fingers move on their own. The piano felt alive under her touch, and the sound washed over the ballroom like warm light. Her melody grew deeper, fuller. It wasn't something grand, but the emotion behind it was unmistakable. It came from years of love, loss, and everything she kept hidden from the world. Leonard's amused expression slowly shifted. His smile faded, replaced by a look of surprise. He hadn't expected this. No one had, Emily continued, unaware of anything except the music. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. She forgot about her job, the pressure, the embarrassment. All she felt was the familiar comfort of creating something beautiful. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, the last note hung in the air for a long moment. The room was completely silent. Then, applause. A wave of clapping swept through the ballroom. Louder than anything from earlier in the evening. People stood from their seats, cheering softly, smiling with genuine admiration. Emily's eyes widened. She didn't expect this. She didn't even want attention. She wasn't ready for it. Her hands trembled again. But for a different reason this time. Leonard stepped forward slowly, looking at her with stunned curiosity. His voice was softer than before when he said, "I didn't know you could do that?" Emily didn't respond. She simply stood up, feeling her heartbeat echo in her chest. She tried to step away from the piano, but she wasn't sure where to go. The guests continued clapping, some even calling out compliments. That was beautiful. Incredible. Where did she learn to play like that? Emily felt overwhelmed, but she stayed still, waiting for the moment to pass. The event had changed. The mood had changed, and Emily had no idea just how much more. Her life was about to shift because of this unexpected moment. For several long seconds, Emily stood beside the piano without moving, unsure what she was supposed to do. The applause from the guests kept rolling through the room like a warm wave, rising and falling as more people joined in. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. Praise was something rare in her life lately, and certainly nothing like the sudden admiration of a ballroom full of strangers. She lowered her gaze, hoping the noise would settle soon so she could slip back into the background. But the guests were too amazed to let the moment fade so quickly. Some applauded with wide smiles. Others leaned toward their neighbors to whisper about her unexpected talent. A few people even stood from their seats to get a better look at her, as if trying to understand how someone so quiet and humble could play with such emotion. Emily felt her cheeks growing warm. She stepped back from the piano slightly, almost as if she needed space to breathe. The world around her felt unreal, like she had stepped into a dream where everything was just a little too bright, a little too loud, and far too overwhelming. Leonard eventually lifted a hand, signaling the crowd to settle down. He cleared his throat gently and stepped closer to Emily, though his usual confident smile had softened into something more thoughtful. "Well," he said slowly, "that was unexpected. In the best way." The room chuckled softly, but Emily didn't speak. She simply kept her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Waiting for whatever would happen next, Leonard turned toward the audience again. It seems our evening has been blessed with a surprise performance. I must admit I thought our young server would play a simple tune, something small. He paused, then looked back at her. But it appears she had something much more powerful hidden away. The way he said it wasn't teasing anymore. There was genuine respect in his voice. Emily looked at him briefly, unsure whether she was supposed to respond. She decided it was safer to stay quiet. "You've given us something beautiful tonight," he added. "Truly." He offered a polite nod, but she could tell he was still processing what he had just witnessed. It was clear that he had expected an amusing moment, not a performance that would silence the entire ballroom. Finally, Leonard motioned gently toward the side of the stage. "You can return to your work now if you wish." Emily nodded quickly, grateful for the chance to leave the spotlight. She stepped away from the piano and walked back toward the edge of the room, though her steps were unsteady. She felt like the entire crowd W. I was still watching her, even as they began talking again. But instead of fading back into the background, something unexpected happened. People began approaching her. One woman stopped her near a tall floral arrangement. "Dear, that was lovely," she said warmly. "Do you take lessons somewhere? Or do you perform? I'd love to hear you again." Emily shook her head shyly. "No, ma'am. I don't perform anymore. I used to. A long time ago, but you should think about returning to it," the woman said with a bright smile before drifting back to her table, before Emily could catch her breath. Another guest approached a man in a dark suit with kind eyes. "Excuse me," he said. "I couldn't help but admire your skill. That was a beautiful melody. Do you compose your own music?" Emily shook her head again, her voice barely more than a whisper. "No, sir. I just play how I feel." "That's what made it special," he replied. The praise continued for several minutes. People stopped her to shake her hand, to congratulate her, to tell her how moved they were. Emily tried to stay polite, though she had never felt so overwhelmed in her life. Her chest still fluttered with nerves, but beneath the anxiety, there was something else, something warm. It felt like the version of herself she had buried was finally being seen again. Eventually, the crowd settled back into their seats, and the event returned to its planned schedule. The hired pianist came forward to perform, but even he seemed slightly humbled. He smiled at Emily from across the room, offering a nod of respect. Emily returned a tiny nod. Though she didn't feel like she deserved that kind of acknowledgement from a professional, she found a quiet spot near the back of the room where she could breathe without people coming up to her. She picked up a new tray from the serving station and tried to focus on her work again, but she could still feel the lingering attention from several tables. Every now and then, when she walked past a group, she heard someone whispering about her unexpected performance. As she served drinks, Emily's mind drifted. She thought about the feeling she had when she played The Way the World Disappeared, how her hands had felt light and free, how the melody had flowed out of her without effort. It was the first time in a long while that she had felt truly herself. But then her thoughts shifted, as they always did, to her mother. She wondered what her mother would say if she had seen that moment. Maybe she would smile the way she used to when listening from the kitchen, humming along softly as Emily played. The memory made her heart ache gently, while she tried not to think too deeply. She didn't notice that Leonard was walking toward her again. He approached with a more cautious expression than earlier, as if he wasn't quite sure how to talk to her now that he had seen what she could do. "Emily," he said quietly. She straightened immediately. "Yes, sir?" "You handled that very well," he said, folding his hands in front of him. "I hope I didn't put you in an uncomfortable situation." Emily looked down. "It was surprising, sir, but it's all right," Leonard nodded slowly. "I wasn't expecting such a performance. You truly have a gift. Do you perform anywhere?" She shook her head gently. "No, I don't play much anymore." "Why not?" he asked, though he spoke with genuine curiosity this time. Emily hesitated. She didn't want to share too much. Personal stories didn't belong in conversations with people like him. "Life got busy," she said softly, "and my mother hasn't been well. I work as much as I can." Leonard nodded again, understanding more than she expected. "I see." He paused before continuing. Still, you should know that your performance touched a lot of people tonight. It touched me as well. Emily didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded. You're very talented, he added. And talent like that shouldn't stay hidden. Emily felt a small knot form in her throat. Thank you, sir. Leonard gave a small smile. All right. I won't keep you from your work. He turned to walk away, but after a few steps he paused and looked back. I may ask for you again before the night is over. Emily's eyes widened slightly. Ask for me. He nodded. Don't worry, it won't be anything like earlier. I simply want to speak with you again later. With that, he walked toward a group of guests waiting to speak with him. Emily stood still for a moment, unsure how to process everything. She wondered if she had done something wrong, or something right, or something that would change her life in ways she couldn't predict. The rest of the evening continued with music, dancing, and cheerful conversations. Emily served food and drinks, cleaned empty glasses, and helped reset tables. But the feeling in the air had changed. People treated her differently now, not like just another server, but like someone special. She wasn't sure she liked the attention, but she couldn't deny that it felt nice to be seen later in the night. When most guests had returned to their seats, Emily finally found a moment to breathe near the back entrance. The air outside the ballroom was cooler, and she let herself relax for a brief moment. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, I didn't mess up. It was a small thing to say, but it meant everything to her. She had faced something terrifying, something she never asked for, and she had survived it. More than that, she had impressed people. She had reminded herself of a part of her she thought she had lost, while she stood quietly. Someone else stepped out into the hallway. It was the professional pianist. He approached her gently so he wouldn't startle her. Excuse me, he said softly. I didn't want to interrupt earlier. Emily turned, surprised. Oh. Hello. I just wanted to say that your playing was beautiful, he said sincerely. You play with feeling. That's something you can't teach. Emily lowered her gaze, embarrassed. Thank you. I haven't played in a long time. I should play again, he said simply. The world needs musicians like you. She didn't know how to respond, so she just offered a small, grateful smile. He nodded and returned to the ballroom. Emily stood alone for another moment, letting his words settle in her mind. She wondered if she truly could play again, if there was a path back to music waiting for her somewhere. When she walked back inside, the night continued as usual, but the atmosphere around her felt lighter somehow. She didn't know what the next part of the evening would bring. She didn't know what Leonard wanted to speak to her about. She didn't know if this moment at the piano would change anything, her job, her daily life, or her dreams. But something inside her had awakened, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. The hidden part of Hertha, part that loved music more than anything, was no longer silent, and the night was far from over. The night continued in a soft rhythm, but something in the atmosphere had clearly shifted. The elegant ballroom still glowed with warm lights, and the guests still laughed and talked, but every now and then, someone would turn to look at Emily. Their glances weren't sharp or judging. They carried curiosity, respect, even admiration. She tried her best not to notice, but it was impossible to fully ignore. She kept working, moving from table to table, clearing glasses, placing new ones, and offering silent smiles. Her hands were steady again, though her heart still felt light in a strange way. It was as if the performance had lifted a weight off her chest. Even though she hadn't meant to reveal that part of herself, still, she wondered what would come next. Leonard's words stayed in her mind, his promise that he wanted to speak to her again later. She didn't know if that was a good thing or something she should worry about. Wealthy people had a way of making decisions quickly, and sometimes unpredictably. She didn't want her job to be at risk, but she also couldn't pretend nothing had happened. She found a quiet moment behind the serving station near the kitchen. One of the older servers, a kind woman who had worked many events, looked at her with a smile. You handled yourself well, the woman said softly. Emily nodded. Thank you. I didn't expect any of that. No one did, the woman chuckled. But it was a good surprise. Just stay calm, dear. Things have a way of working out. Emily tried to take comfort in her words, but her mind still wandered back to memories she hadn't thought about in months. Moments from her childhood when her mother would sit on the old couch, listening as she practiced scales and small songs. The living room back then was always filled with a warm glow in the afternoons. Sunlight pouring through sheer curtains and lighting up the sheet. Music spread across the piano. "Play it again," her mother would say softly. Whenever she finished a piece, and she'd play the melody again. Just to see her mother smile, that smile always made her feel safe. Like everything in the world was exactly where it should be. Those memories felt far away now. Life had changed too much. Bills, appointments, work shifts, those replaced melodies and lessons, and afternoons filled with music. She shook off the thoughts. She couldn't let herself get lost in what life used to be. Around an hour passed before she saw Leonard approaching her again. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes held a seriousness she hadn't seen earlier. "May I speak with you for a moment?" he asked politely. Emily nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." He gestured toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, away from the crowds and music. She followed him, feeling a mix of nervousness and curiosity. When they stopped near a tall window overlooking the estate's garden, Leonard folded his arms lightly, not in an intimidating way, but in a thoughtful one. "I must apologize," he began. "Earlier, I didn't realize you had real talent. I shouldn't have made light of your humming or asked you to play in front of everyone like that." Emily blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected an apology, especially from someone like him. "It's all right, sir," she said quietly. "I wasn't offended, just surprised." He nodded slowly. "Still, it wasn't the right way to handle things. But once you played—" He paused, searching for the right words. "I don't think I've ever heard someone play like that during one of my events. Not even the professionals." Emily lowered her gaze, embarrassed. "I just played something simple." "Simple," he repeated with a light laugh. "You call that simple?" My guests were speechless. She didn't know what to say. She never thought of herself as extraordinary. She had played as she always used to, honest, emotionally, from the heart. Leonard studied her quietly for a moment. "Where did you learn to play? Were you trained somewhere?" Emily hesitated, but she saw no harm in telling the truth. "My mother taught me first. She played piano, too. Later, I took lessons and practiced every day. I planned to study music, but..." She stopped. She didn't usually talk about this. The words felt heavy, as if they had been locked inside her for too long. But life changed. Leonard guessed, gently nodded. "Yes, sir. My mother got sick. I couldn't leave her alone, and we didn't have money anymore. So I stopped playing." He listened closely, his expression softening. "You gave up your dream to take care of family." Emily shrugged a little. "I did what I had to do." Leonard looked thoughtful. "I respect that. Not many people would make that kind of sacrifice." She didn't know if she deserved praise. She only did what anyone would do for someone they loved. "You know," he continued, "your story. It's the kind of thing people don't expect when they look at someone working at an event. But you're a reminder that talent and hardship don't always show on the surface." Emily didn't know what to say. She stared at her hands. "I just try my best." Leonard smiled gently. "And tonight, your best changed the entire atmosphere of my event." She felt her cheeks warm again, but the kindness in his tone made her relax slightly. "I want to help you," he said suddenly. Emily looked up, startled. "Help me?" "Yes," Leonard said with certainty. "People with your level of talent deserve opportunities. And I have resources that could open doors for you. Whether it's lessons, support, or something more professional." Emily's breath caught. The idea of returning to music almost felt impossible, like reaching for something too far away. "Sir, I don't know. My life is very full right now, and I don't think I'm ready for anything big." "I'm not asking you to make a decision tonight," Leonard said calmly. "Just think about it. You don't have to give me an answer now, or even tomorrow, but I'd like to support you if you ever choose to return to music." Emily nodded slowly, unsure how else to respond. Thank you. Really, that means a lot. Leonard gave a reassuring smile. For now, just enjoy the rest of the evening. And try not to run away if people compliment you again. Emily couldn't help but laugh softly. I'll try, sir. He nodded and walked back to the center of the room, where several guests were waiting to speak with him. Emily let out a long breath once he was gone. She felt overwhelmed again, but in a gentler way this time, a way that felt almost hopeful. She went back to her work, though her thoughts drifted constantly. Could she really return to music? Would she even be good enough anymore? Could she balance that with caring for her mother and working 2 jobs? The questions circled in her mind, refusing to settle later in the evening. When the main performances ended, dessert was served. Emily carried trays of small pastries, weaving carefully between tables. She kept smiling politely, though her mind was still far away, as she placed a dessert plate on a table. She overheard a couple talking. That young woman, one of them whispered, "The one who played earlier, Shay, has real expression. Not mechanical like many musicians." "Yes, she was wonderful," the other replied. "I'd love to hear her again someday." The quiet praise made Emily's chest tighten with emotion. She hadn't felt pride like this in a very long time. When the event began to wind down, some guests left early while others lingered. Many stopped to personally thank Emily once more. She accepted their words with shy nods, still unsure how to handle the attention. Eventually, the ballroom emptied enough for the staff to start cleaning up. Emily helped stack plates, gather napkins, and move chairs. Her feet hurt, her back ached. Something inside her felt lighter than usual. When she stepped outside into the cool night air to place a tray into the catering van, she stole a moment to breathe again. The stars were visible above the estate, bright and scattered across the quiet sky. She closed her eyes and replayed the melody she had performed. The feeling returned, the warmth, the release, the freedom. Could she really return to music? Her mind whispered yes, her fears whispered no. She didn't know which voice would win. When she returned inside, Leonard was waiting near the entrance. He wasn't smiling in his usual confident way. Instead, he looked calm, thoughtful, almost peaceful. "Heading home soon?" he asked. Emily nodded. "Yes, sir. After we finish cleaning." "I meant what I said earlier," Leonard said. "If you ever want help lessons, training, or even a small performance opportunity, I'll be here. You don't owe me anything. Just promise you'll at least think about it." Emily nodded slowly. "I will. Truly, thank you." He offered a warm smile. "Safe travels home, Emily." And with that, he walked away. Emily stood still for a moment after he left, letting the night settle around her. The quiet hum of staff packing up filled the ballroom. The lights dimmed as the chandeliers were turned off one by one. Her life felt uncertain, fragile, and yet full of possibility. For the first time in a long time, she felt something new: hope that maybe she hadn't said goodbye to her dreams, hope that maybe she could be more than what life had forced her to become, hope that the part of her she had locked away wasn't lost forever. She turned to join the other staff members, feeling a small, genuine smile form. Tomorrow wouldn't be easy. Life wouldn't magically become perfect, but something had changed, and Emily knew deep inside that the night's events would follow her far after she left the estate's glowing lights behind. The world had seen her, and a part of her one she thought was gone had finally come back to life. The room was still buzzing from everything that had happened, and yet the feeling in the air was nothing like the fancy calm that usually followed these kinds of events. People were talking in excited voices, some still whispering about the performance they had just heard. No one seemed interested in their plates anymore. Even the servers walking around could sense the shift, moving slower, almost watching the guests instead of serving them. It was as if the entire evening had taken on a new life. Emily didn't know where to put herself at first. She stood near the corner of the room, holding the same tray she had picked up after walking away from the piano. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the kind of rush a person feels when they do something that has been waiting inside them for years. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself, but every few seconds, someone new came up to her. A woman in a soft silver dress approached her first. She didn't act like a guest speaking to a server. She looked at Emily the same way someone looks at a performer they admire. "That was beautiful," she said. "You played like someone who belongs on a stage, not carrying trays." Emily gave a small smile, unsure how to respond. She'd heard kind words before, but never in a moment like this. Never in a moment where the whole room seemed to be agreeing with them. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I wasn't expecting any of this. Sometimes the world sees you when you least expect it." The woman replied before giving her hand a small squeeze and stepping away. As soon as she left, another person came forward, a man with kind eyes and a calm voice. He said he knew several people in the music world and could make introductions if she was interested. Emily nodded politely, still not sure how real any of this was. She had spent so long trying to blend in that suddenly being noticed felt almost unreal. Across the room, the host, Mr. Whitmore, stood in deep thought. He wasn't mingling like he normally would. Instead, he kept glancing at Emily, as if trying to piece together how he had overlooked something so extraordinary. Eventually, he walked toward her. Emily noticed him approaching and straightened her posture, unsure of what he would say. After all, everything that happened had started with his challenge. She didn't know whether he was upset, embarrassed, or simply surprised. "May I speak with you for a moment?" he asked gently. She nodded. They stepped aside near a quiet corner of the room, away from the cluster of guests. "I owe you an apology," he began. His tone wasn't proud or stiff. It was genuine, like someone who had replayed a mistake in his mind and finally understood it. "I didn't mean to embarrass you. I thought I was making light conversation. I can see now that it came across as disrespectful, and I'm sorry." Emily looked at him, surprised by the honesty in his voice. "It's all right," she said softly. "I wasn't trying to show anyone up. I just didn't want the situation to get worse." He nodded slowly. "Even so, you handled it with grace. And what you shared afterward? Your story, your commitment to your mother, your sacrifices. It moved me."